A small recap of what we did on the accounting errors on the suspense account. We said, one, that accounting errors are simply the mistakes the accountant might make in the process of recording and balancing transactions in the ledger accounts. As the accountant prepares the ledger accounts and balances them, he might make some mistakes. And those errors, we broadly classified them into two. Number one are the errors not affecting the trial balance purpose. Accounting errors that are not affecting the trial balance totals. And we said that these are the mistakes the accountant can make in the ledger accounts, but those mistakes cannot be revealed in the trial balance, simply because your trial balance will balance. So as an accountant, you might not be able to know whether you made an error or not, because once the trial balance has balanced, you cannot be able to know whether there is a mistake that you did. But you can make some mistakes, but your trial balance will still balance. So those are the errors under the first category, errors not affecting, meaning that even if those errors are going to be there in your ledger accounts, your trial balance will simply balance. And we said the reason as to why your trial balance will simply balance, even if you have made the errors, is that you have made the mistakes, but those mistakes are affecting the debit and the credit sides equally. You commit a mistake, that mistake is affecting the debit and the credit side equally. Therefore, when we are extracting our trial balance will still balance, because the debit and the credit sides are equally affected by those errors. And we said that those errors are, number one, error of omission. The error of omission. And by the error of omission, we mean that the transaction is completely omitted. You did not debit anywhere, you did not credit anywhere. So it is a total omission, meaning that the amount of the transaction is missing on the debit side of the trial balance, and it is equally missing on the credit side of the trial balance. So your trial balance will simply balance. So that transaction is like it was never noticed by the accountant to be recorded. It was omitted. So no debit entry and no credit entry. So the amount is missing on the debit, equally the amount is missing on the credit. Your trial balance will still balance. Number two, the error of commission. The error of commission. The error of commission occurs when a transaction is entered in the correct class, but wrong account for a person. Correct class, but wrong account. And it normally affects the debtors and the creditors. You can find a case whereby I have sold goods to Rose, but instead of recording this transaction in the account of Rose, I make a mistake. I record it maybe in the account of Roseline. So I have debited the account of Roseline instead of the account of Rose. That is an error of commission when we have posted the entry in the wrong person's account, But the bottom line, you observed the double entry. You observed the double entry. What does that mean? What does that mean? I sold goods to Rose. So I was supposed to debit Rose and credit the sales. But I debited Roseline and credited the sales. So at the end of the day, I did the double entry. I debited somewhere and I credited somewhere. Even if the debit entry is in the wrong account, the trial balance will not detect that mistake. It will simply balance because double entry was observed. because the double entry was observed. That is the error of commission. Number 3, is what we call the error of principle. The error of principle will occur when a transaction is entered in the wrong class. When a transaction is entered in the wrong class. In the wrong class here, we mean if, for example, it is an expense, it is recorded in the account of an asset. If it is, for example, the asset, it is recorded in the purchases. So that one becomes an error of principle. So it occurs when a transaction is recorded in the wrong class of accounts. Like, for example, you pay something like repairs to motor vehicle, and then you go and debit the motor vehicle. You know, repairs are supposed to be considered sorry for that. It's like our internet is fluctuating. So I was explaining the error of principle. It occurs when a transaction is entered in the wrong class. And I've said, for example, it is an expense, you make a mistake and you record it in the account of an asset. Or it is something like an asset, you make a mistake and go and record it in the account of the purchases. That is an error of principle. Like, for example, you pay repairs for motor vehicle, and then instead of recording it that particular expense in the repairs account, you make a mistake and you debit the motor vehicle. That is an error of principle. When you repair something, you should actually record that one in the repairs account. You don't record it in the asset that you have repaired. If I repair a furniture, I should not record that in the furniture account. I should record it in the repairs account. Alternatively, you have bought a computer. I purchased a computer. And then instead of debiting the computer account, I debit the purchases account. And we all know that purchases is only reserved to record the purchase of goods. But you have purchased a fixed asset, and then you go and record it in the purchases account. That is still an error of principle. That is an error of principle. Then number 4 is the error of complete reversal of entries. The error of complete reversal of entries. That one occurs when you interchange the account to be debited and credited. When you interchange the account to be debited and credited. What does that mean? I've paid maybe rent expense. I'm supposed to debit rent and maybe credit cash. But instead of doing that, I find that I have debited cash and credited rent. So I have interchanged the two accounts. The one that was supposed to be debited has been credited, and the one which was supposed to be credited is the one that has been debited. We call it the error of complete reversal of entries. Again, your trial balance will not be affected. Even if we've interchanged them, at the end of the day, we have debited and credited some ledger accounts. Therefore, your trial balance will still balance. So the error of complete reversal, the two accounts are completely interchanged with each other. They are correct accounts, but interchanged in terms of the recording. We also have what we call the error of original entry. The error of original entry occurs when we use the wrong amount to debit and credit the affected accounts. Like, for example, I have sold goods worth 10,000 by cash. Instead of debiting and crediting the account with the 10,000, I make a mistake and I debit and credit the affected accounts by maybe 1,000. The correct amount is 10,000, but I debit and credit the affected account with 1,000. So you realize that the account that was supposed to be debited will be debited by less 9,000. The account that was supposed to be credited will be credited by less 9,000. So you realize at the end of the day, the amount that is missing on the debit it is also missing on the credit. So at the end of the day, the trial balance will still balance. The trial balance will still balance. That is what we call the error of original entry. And actually the error of original entry will result into either overcast or undercast of a particular amount in a particular ledger account. Like in this case, the 10,000 was supposed to be used to debit and credit. But what have we done? We have debited with 1,000, credited with 1,000. There is an undercast of 9,000 in both ledger accounts that were supposed to be recorded. And then lastly, we have the compensating errors. The compensating errors are the errors that cancel the effect of each other. Errors that cancel the effect of each other. You find that maybe in one error, we have the undercasted. We had recorded less on the debit side, but we also make another error, and now we undercast the credit side. Or we make an error whereby the debit is exaggerated by 2,000, and then later on, we make another error where the credit is also exaggerated by 2,000. Those two errors, they cancel each other. It is not going to be detected in the trial balance. We also have lastly a transposition. The transposition error. The transposition error occurs when we use a wrong sequence of digits in an amount. And actually, we normally link it with the error of original entry. These two. When we use the wrong sequence of digits, maybe it was 894. You find that you have debited and credited with 849. That one becomes the error of transposition. The sequence of the digits has been interfered. So at the end of the day, we shall result into a wrong amount. And that wrong amount is the one that is used to debit and credit the affected account. It is known as the transposition errors. So you'll find that actually in the November series, both the old and the new curricula, they ask this. Explain 5 errors which are not revealed in the trial balance. These are the errors. You are supposed to explain them. What do we mean? You say error of omission, then you explain what it is when the transaction is completely omitted. What is an error of commission? Error whereby a transaction is entered in the right class but wrong person's account. The error of principal, where a transaction is entered in the wrong class of account. Complete reversal, where the two accounts to be debited and credited are completely reversed or interchanged, like that. So they were supposed to explain any 5, and then they earn 10 marks from that. So that is it. So I want us now to see how do we correct the errors. How do we correct these errors when they occur? When they occur, how do you correct the errors? Errors, once they have occurred, the accountant has got a responsibility of correcting them so that the books of account can be able to have the correct entries. The correction of errors normally happens in what we call the general journal. The general journal has got that format. The dates column, the details column. The details column, you are going to record the account that is supposed to be debited and credited for that error to be completely eliminated or corrected. And then now you put the amount either on the debit side or the credit side of those accounts. The general journal is also prepared on the basis of double entry. So for every error, there must be an account to be debited and there must be an account to be credited. It is always prepared on the basis of journal entry or double entry. In that case, always start with the account to be debited, followed by the account to be credited for the error to be rectified. Like for example, to correct error, number one, I'm supposed to debit A account and credit B account. I should come here and say this is number one or this one. A account is supposed to be debited by a certain amount. B account is going to be credited by a certain amount. Always start with the account to be debited first, followed by the account to be credited. The account to be debited, the amount is indicated on the debit column. The account to be credited, the same amount is indicated on the credit column. And then you can give a small narration, and then you close that. You go to the next one. You go to the next error number 2. Maybe the account to be debited is X. You put the amount there. The account to be credited is Y. You put the amount there, and then you give a narration and you close. Always the account to be debited will come first, followed by the account to be credited. So the accounts will be like that, a debit and a credit entry like that. Now, I want us to discuss about the errors not affecting, the ones that have just listed, the error of omission, commission, principal, complete reversal, original entry, and all that, and how they are corrected in the general journal. So I'm going to give you some illustration here, and then we correct them in the general journal. So, illustrations. Maybe you are given error number 1. It says, goods sold by cash for 5,000 has completely been omitted, like that. That is an error that you have been given, and you are told, can you correct that error in the general journal, or can you pass the journal entries? When it is an error of omission, it is pretty easy. It is very easy to correct it because that transaction is completely omitted. It has not been recorded anywhere. To correct it is simply to record it now. You record it now. So you need to actually ask yourself which account was supposed to be debited from this transaction and which account is supposed to be credited. Can I have somebody who can try? Goods sold by cash for 5,000. Tell me the account that was supposed to be debited and the account that was supposed to be credited.
There's a sales accounts and cash account.
Sales account and cash account, that is correct. Now tell me, between the two, which one should be debited and which one should be credited? Somebody else to try?
You credit cash.
You credit cash. Rose?
You debit cash.
And then you credit?
Sales.
Correct. we said, it is a rule, and always remember that when goods are sold, you credit sales. Sales is always and ever credited. Sales is always credited, and then if it is sales by cash, you will debit cash. If it is sales by check, you will debit bank. If it is sales on credit, you debit the customer. Note that. Sales account is always credited. The debit entry will go to either cash if sales were in cash, like in this case. If they were sold by check, we could have debited bank. If they are sold on credit, we debit the debtor, who is the customer. So, Rose, you are very correct. We should debit cash. So you come here and say, this is error number 1. I debit cash by 5,000 because the transaction is 5,000. Then I credit sales, right? Their sales by 5,000. You can give a narration here, which is not important for now. We can do it later, and then you can arrive. You have corrected that error as simple as that. Identify the account to be debited, debit it. The account to be credited, credit it by the same amount. That is all. Goods sold to John for 2,000 on credit has been entered in John. Has been entered in John's account. Goods sold to John for 2,000 on credit has been entered in John's account. If you are so keen, you can be able to note that we don't have any problem with the sales account. Sales account has no issue in this case. The issue is between the account of John and Joan. Joan and John, that is where the problem is. And a transaction has been entered in John's instead of Joan. And that is what we call the error of commission, when you enter transaction in the wrong person's account. And in accounting, when a transaction is entered in the wrong account, you have got a responsibility of reversing that particular transaction or canceling it. Reverse, which is the same as canceling the transaction from that account. Because goods were sold to John, but they have been captured in the account of John, which is a mistake. Now, how can we rectify this mistake? To rectify this mistake simply means we reverse this entry we made in the account of John, we reverse it, and then we take it to where it is supposed to be. It is supposed to be in the account of John. And I said, when I was handling this first example, when goods are sold on credit, you debit the customer who bought those goods. That customer is an asset to the business. He has our money. We should debit John and credit sales. The mistake that happened, we debited John and credited sales. So sales is already credited. We don't have any problem with it. Now we sort out the problem that is here between John and John. John was debited on behalf of John. If John was debited by mistake, to cancel or reverse that mistake, you credit. To cancel is simply to put it on the other side. If the account was debited, to reverse that, you credit. If the account was credited, to reverse that, you debit. So in this case, we should go ahead and reverse. John was debited on behalf of John. We should credit John and debit John. We debit the correct customer, John, by 2,000. Then John, who was initially debited on behalf of John, will be credited. Note why we are doing that. We are debiting John because that is the correct person to be debited. We are crediting John because he was initially debited. Now we are crediting to reverse that error that was made in debiting his account. Accounting cancelling is just putting the figure on the opposite side, and the issue is sorted. Number 3, a furniture bought for shillings 8,000 was recorded in purchases. A furniture bought for 8,000 shillings was recorded in purchases. When you are told it was recorded in purchases, it simply means that we treated it as a purchases, and we all know that purchases is only meant for goods. Purchases is only meant for goods. We don't record a fixed asset in the purchases account. Mary, you are asked a question. So sales account is not affected. Yes, sales account is not affected because in this one, the problem is in these two persons. The problem is in these two persons. This transaction and this transaction, they are not the same. In the first one, the transaction was completely omitted. There was no debit and credit. So we had to include the sales account here because it was affecting sales and cash, and none of them had been recorded. We put both of them. But in the second one, we have clearly been told that it has been entered in John's account. So the issue is on the person, John and Joan. Sales account is correctly recorded. It has been credited, but the account that was debited is the wrong one. That is why we are dealing with only the two people. Sales has no issue. Here, a furniture bought for 8,000 was recorded in the purchases. You know, when you buy a fixed asset, you should never make a mistake of debiting purchases, because purchases is only meant for stock. When stock is bought, that is when we debit the purchases. A furniture is not a stock item. It should be debited in the furniture account, not the purchases account. So when this error has occurred, which is an error of principle, you need to reverse what you entered in the purchases and then record it in the correct account. Reverse what was entered in the purchases and then record it in the correct account. The correct account was furniture. We should come here. Number 3, debit the furniture by 8,000. If the entry was initially posted in purchases, then it simply means that purchases was debited, because anytime goods are bought, we debit purchases. So we debited purchases instead of debiting furniture, or in simple terms, purchases was debited by mistake. To reverse that mistake, because it was debited, you will credit it. So we reverse the wrong entry in purchases, we post it in the correct entry. So we have debited the correct account, we have reversed the purchases, which was a wrong account. Wages for shillings for 4,000 was recorded in the books as wages paid for 4,000 was recorded in the books as 400. This is what we call the error of original entry. We have done a mistake of using wrong amount, but the wrong amount was used to debit and credit the affected accounts. How do you handle that error? You see, let me illustrate here. This is paid for 4,000. Introduced here cash. It was paid by cash. Yeah? So when we pay an expense, we know that the expense that we are paying should be debited. So we should debit the wages. And when you pay by cash, cash will be reducing your credit. Anytime cash or bank is reducing your credit. So this is now the mistake that happened. We debited wages, but we debited using 400. We credited cash, but we credited using what? 400. But the correct amount is what? 4,000. What do we do now in that case? In that case, we should do what we call a top-up. That is an error of undercast. It is an undercast. We have recorded by less. So, how much did we record these accounts by less? Or what is the difference? If it was 4,000, but we recorded 400, there is a difference of what? 3,600.
3,600.
3,600 is missing on the debit of wages. 3,600 is missing on the credit of cash. And when it's an undercount, it is very simple. If the account that was debited, debit by the difference. The account that was credited, credit by the difference. So we needed to add 3,600 here and add 3,600 there, so that the two sides now can have a total of what? 4,000. So what we have done is debiting wages by 600, and then we credit cash by 600, the difference. So that plus the 4,000 that was placed there, and now this 3,600 will add up to 4,000. We only use the difference. But when it is an undercast, note this, because sometimes you can have an overcast. When it is an undercast, you just place the difference on the side where the entries were made. Wages was debited, so you debit again by the difference. Cash was credited, you credit cash by the difference. So that now the two accounts can have the amount they were supposed to have. Example number 5. Example number 5. Cash of shares 5,000 deposited in the bank was debited. Cash and credited in bank. You have taken 5,000 from your cash box to go and deposit in the bank account. Now, you go ahead and debiting cash and then crediting bank. Who can locate the error there? What is the mistake?
Complete reversal.
Yes, that is a complete reversal error. When you take cash to bank, it is bank that is increasing. Therefore, bank should be debited. And the cash is reducing, cash should be credited. But now, from the statement, they did the opposite. They did the opposite. it was debited in cash. You cannot debit cash and it is reducing. And then it was credited in bank. You cannot credit bank when it is receiving money. So you record this by doubling the amount. You'll have to record it by doubling the amount. Why do we double anyway? I told you that we are doubling simply because we are doing two things. One, we are canceling the error and then recording it afresh. Canceling and recording using the same amount. So here we have the cash and the bank. We start by the mistake they did. It was debited in cash. So cash was debited by 5,000. Bank was credited by 5,000. That is the error they made. But we all know that cash was supposed to be credited and bank debited because bank is receiving. Once you receive an asset, you debit and then credit to the one that is reducing. Now you see, if we come and do this, bank was supposed to be debited. If you come and debit just by 5,000, what you have done is just to reverse this. You have reversed this 5,000 that was in error on credit. When you also come and credit this one by just 5,000, you have only reversed this. To reverse an account, you want to make sure that that account does not have any balance. So, if you want to balance these ledger accounts, they have nil balance carried down because the debit and the credit, they are equal. The debit and the credit are equal. That account has got nil balance, it has been cancelled or it has been reversed. But that was not the motive. The motive is to have bank having a debit of what? 5,000. It should have a debit of 5,000. And the cash should have a credit of what? 5,000. So what we have done here, we have credited cash by 5,000 to cancel this, and then we have credited again with 5,000 to record it. So we have cancelled and recorded at the same time. So we have used a total of what? 10,000. The same case, bank was supposed to be debited, but there is an amount of 5,000 that is on the credit. You cancel the amount on the credit by debit. So this is for cancelling. And then after cancelling, we need to have 5,000 appearing on the debit of the bank. So we record now again. So again here we have debited by 10K. So when it is an error of reversal, as an accountant, you have two responsibilities. First of all, cancel, then record. So you find that the amount that was in error has been used twice. That's why we double. You cancel and record. Cancel, then record. You have used 5,000 twice, so you have recorded it as 10,000 there. So the account that was debited, and which is actually the account which was supposed to be debited, is bank. You have debited by 10,000. Then you credit the cash, which was supposed to be credited from the word "oh," like that. Then right. Those errors have been corrected. Let me give you the last one, which is on about the overcasts. Goods bought by cash or shillings and 500 has been recorded as $5,000. bought goods by cash, valued at 9,500. But when we went to post them in the ledger accounts, instead of using 9,500, we used 95,000. It is still an error of original entry because the amount is wrong. But now you should be able to note, first of all, we get the difference, 95,000 minus the correct amount, 9,500, there is 85,500. The difference, 85,500. This difference this time round is an overcast. This is an overcast. Overcast means that we have recorded by more. 9,500 was the correct amount, but we used 95,000. So we recorded more amount on those ledger accounts. And remember, they are goods bought. The goods bought, that is supposed to affect the purchases. It was bought by cash, it's supposed to affect the cash account. But we exaggerated, we overcasted those accounts by 85,500. When you buy goods, always debit purchases. When we buy goods, we always debit purchases. We did that. We debited purchases, but we debited with 95,000 instead of 9,500. Who can tell me what has happened in that account? We have got excess on the debit. We have debited 95,000 instead of debiting with 9,500. We have got excess of 85,500 on the debit of purchases. How do you remove that excess? From the debit, from the DR of purchases, it is the same as reversing. But this time round, you only reverse the excess. You only reverse the excess. The excess is 85,500. So if purchases was debited by 95,000, instead of 9,500, then we shall reverse the excess, the overcast. We shall credit purchases now by 85,500 to remove the excess or the overcast. This purchases was financed by cash. So cash was credited. The mistake, it was credited by 95,000 instead of 9,500. Again, the cash has been overcredited. How do you reverse the excess on the credit of cash? You debit cash by 85,500. So this is how we are going to post that. Cash was overcredited, so we debit cash. Always start with the accounts to be debited. Purchases was over-debited, so we reverse the excess by crediting the purchases. That is all. That is all that was required in those transactions. That is how you correct them. Identify the account to be debited, you capture it first, and the amount. Any question before I proceed? Any question?
Madam, I have one.
Yes, Emmanuel.
Yeah, so the same question I asked last time, I think it was based on these errors.
Yes.
So as long as the share balance will balance, it means you will give me a tick or some marks, even if I've made these errors.
Yes, you know, as far as marking the accounting paper is concerned, we don't mark the balances. Actually, the balances do not have any marks in the trial balance. The marks are in the entries. The marks are in the entries. So you will get the marks for any correct entry. But where you made an error, you will miss those marks. You will miss the marks where there is errors, but where the transactions are correctly recorded, you will get marks. So you might find that maybe the question was having 12 marks. You can end up getting 8 out of 12. You only miss the 4 where the errors were posted.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
I want us to have the last illustration on this. So Shira here. Yes, Shira, that is very correct. When we have the error of transposition, remember transposition, we said it is when the accountant uses the wrong sequence in the digits of an amount. When you use that wrong sequence, obviously the accountant will either record by overcast or undercast. So you take the difference between the correct and the wrong amount, and then you ask yourself, is it an overcast or an undercast? If it is an undercast, you top up. If it is an overcast, you minus. To minus, remember, you record it on the opposite side, as we have done here. Cash was initially credited, but now we have debited to remove the overcast. Purchases was debited, now we credit it to remove the overcast. But if it was undercast, purchases was debited, we could have debited again. Cash was credited, we could have credited again. But overcast, you record on the opposite side. You are reversing the extra amount only. Okay. Number. This is the general exam. So let us have the illustrations here. Cash paid for salaries is 11,000. Somebody to tell me what to do there. When it is complete omission, we said very simple. Debit and credit the accounts that were supposed to be affected. Give me the accounts. Cash paid for salaries, 11,000 is completely omitted.
Cash account and salaries account.
Correct. Between the two, which one should we debit?
Credit cash and debit salaries.
Correct. Debit the salaries. The account to be debited will come first. Salaries, 11,000. Then cash, 11,000. That is sorted. Number 2. Goods bought from Jamii or sellers are the credited Jamar or sellers. For shillings, maybe we can say 1,000. We bought goods from Jamii have been credited in Jamar. If you remember very well, he said when you buy goods on credit, debit purchases always, then you credit the supplier, who is the creditor, and the creditor is simply a liability. The problem that happened here, we credited the wrong person. Huh? We credited this person or this wholesaler by the name Jamar, but the correct person who was supposed to be credited was Jamii. So if Jamar was wrongly credited, you reverse that. You reverse that. You reverse that. Reverse this. To reverse a credit entry, you debit. So you debit Jamar by 15,000, then credit the correct one, who is Jamii. Who is Jamii? Just a minute. So you'll agree with me? When you buy goods on credit to a supplier or the person from whom you have bought the goods is always credited. In this case, we had credited the wrong person. This one that was credited by mistake, you reverse by debiting, and then you go and credit the correct person. The cash paid for it, 6,000, was debited in cash and credited in rates. Cash paid for it. Remember, rates are expensive, and rates or any expense when paid is always debited. I hope by now you understand those common statements. Common statements. Number one, expenses are always debited. Number two, sales is always credited, and such kind of statements. So this is an expense which is supposed to be debited. We are spending cash. When we spend cash, you credit cash. So you will agree with me that this is an error of complete reverse. Error of complete reverse. How do you deal with it? There is always some element of doubling the amount. The account that was supposed to be debited is the expense that we have paid, which is rates. The account which is supposed to be credited is cash. The rates, if it was 6,000, remember, had been credited. So to cancel the credit entry and to record it, we shall have to debit by 12,000. 2 times 6,000. The same case, cash was debited and it was supposed to be credited. So we cancel the wrong debit in cash and record it. We shall credit by a total of 12,000. Number 4. Goods sold by check for shillings 1,200 was recorded as 12,000. Goods sold by check for 1,200 was recorded as 12,000. You can be able to note that there is an overcast. Yes, we overcasted this amount. If the correct amount is 1,200, but we have used 12,000, there is an overcast of what? 10,800. The overcast. 10,800. And the accounts that are affected here is sales, and they were sold by check. The other account that is affected is bank. Sales, as usual, is always credited. Bank was debited in this case, but it was they were debited and credited with an excess of this. And therefore, if it's an overcast, we say you need to reverse. You need to minus the excess amount. So, because sales was credited with 10,800 more, to reverse that, it simply means that we shall have to debit sales. We are debiting simply to reverse the excess credit that was made there, 10,800. And then bank was debited by excess of 10,800, meaning that we shall go ahead and do it. And now credit by 10,800. By 10,800. So that we can be able to remove the overcast. The overcast. An error of original entry. The error of original entry. I want you to try and tell me what will happen to this. Insurance of shillings 4,000 paid by cash was debited in cash and credited in insurance. Tell me how we are going to correct that error.
That's complete reversal.
Yes, it is an error of complete reversal. So how do we handle it?
So you will, if insurance of 4,000 was paid by cash and debited in cash, you should credit cash and debit insurance with the same amount.
The same amount
with 4,000 on each side.
on each side. And you have said it is complete reversal.
Yes.
Actually,
Supposed to be 8,000.
Somebody else,
8,000 for both sides.
that was a very good trial. Somebody else, how do we handle this error?
So
Cancel and then record, so double.
So that means debit this account by 8,000, credit this one by 8,000. Which one and which one?
so you credit 8,000 in cash and you debit 8,000 in insurance.
Yes, that is correct, Catherine. We shall go ahead. Remember, we had already reversed. Insurance was credited and the cash was debited. Yet, it was supposed to be the expense that you have paid, we debit it, and the cash, because it was to reduce, you credit. Because we did the opposite, we should come here and debit the correct account, which is insurance, but we cannot now debit 4,000. We say when it is a complete reversal error, you are doing two things to correct it. You cancel, then you post. You cancel, then you post. You cancel by 4,000, then you post 4,000. You will have debited a total of 8,000. And then cash, because it was reducing and it was supposed to be credited, we shall do the same. We had debited it instead of crediting. So we cancel by crediting and then recording 4,000 of the credit. At the end of the day, we will have used an amount of 8,000. An amount of 8,000. So always, where there is reversal, you must double the amount. And this occurs where you have posted the transaction in the correct account, but it is on the wrong side. The account is very correct, but the amount is appearing on the wrong side. How do you take it to the correct side? You take it to the correct side by doing two things. Canceling, because there is an amount that is on the wrong side. Canceling the amount on the wrong side, then posting the amount on the correct side. You will use that amount twice. That's why we always double the amount. That's why we always double the amount. Before I proceed, anybody with a question, anybody who needs a clarification, you have an opportunity. Then I hope everything is well understood. If everything is well understood, allow me to go to the second category of errors. The second category of errors are the errors affecting the trial balance purpose. Errors affecting the trial balance purpose. The errors affecting the trial balance purpose are those errors which, once they are committed by an accountant, the trial balance will not balance. Those errors will be detected in the trial balance. The accountant will be signaled that something is wrong somewhere in your ledger accounts, because we know that if the ledger accounts are correctly prepared, the balances are well extracted, and you take those correct balances to the trial balance, your trial balance should balance without any problem. But if it fails to balance, either the debit is having more than the credit, or the credit totals are more than the debit, then there is a problem in your ledger account. That's why we are saying they are going to affect the trial balance totals, simply because the totals of the trial balance will not agree. And therefore, they are detected or revealed in the trial balance. So the accountant will automatically know that something is wrong. He has a responsibility of going and doing the investigation and correcting those errors so that the trial balance can actually balance. So these errors are normally caused by the following. One is when we have got single entry. The single entry. As an accountant, instead of observing the double entry, some transactions were posted under the single entry, meaning that either you debited an account and you forgot to credit the other one, or you credited and you forgot to debit. So the transaction is only appearing in one account instead of the two accounts. And I started by saying that the reason as to why the trial balance balances is because of the principle of double entry. All the debits that we made, they were credited somewhere else. So at the end of the day, the total debits should be equal to the total credits as revealed in the trial balance. But if you have done a single entry, either you have debited, you forgot to credit, or you have credited, you forgot to debit. So you have done a single entry. Your trial balance will not balance. Your trial balance will not balance. If, for example, it was cash sales of 10,000, you debited cash by 10,000, you forgot to go and credit the sales by 10,000. If you take that error to the trial balance, you'll find that the credit will have less because you forgot to credit sales. So there is less in the credit side, which is the 10,000 that you forgot to put in the sales account for that particular transaction. So an error of single entry will make your trial balance not to balance. That is number one. Number two is what we call what? Use of different amounts. Use of different amounts. Use of different amounts. You have sold the goods by cash 10,000. You go and debit cash by 10,000, but when you go to the credit of the sales account, you only record 1,000. So you have debited an account by 10,000, but the other one, the credit entry is having 1,000. So the credit is having less by 9,000. That one will be detected in the trial balance because the totals of the credit column will be less by 9,000. Or you can also do the opposite. You credit by 10,000, you debit by 1,000. Or you can debit by 10,000, you credit by 100,000. Or any mistake whereby you have used the different amounts for the same transaction. The trial balance will not balance. The trial balance will not balance. Number three is the partial reversal. Partial reversal of entries. For complete reversal, it is never detected in the trial balance because at the end of the day, you reverse both of them. The account to be debited was credited and the one to be credited was debited. So at the end of the day, there was a debit and credit entry. That's why the trial balance will balance, even if you committed the error of complete reversal. But for the partial reversal, it is only a reversal in one of the accounts. Either you have done 2 debits or 2 credits. If I've sold goods by cash 10,000, I debit cash and then I also debit sales. You see now it is only in the sales account that I have done the reversal. But the cash was correctly debited, but sales has been debited instead of being credited. So that is a kind of the partial reversal. It is only in the sales account account whereby the reversal has happened. But cash, it is well sorted. You pay maybe electricity 5,000 by check. You are supposed to debit electricity and credit bank, but you go and credit bank and also credit electricity. So you see now, bank was supposed to be credited, and that is correct. If you credited, it is correct. But now for electricity, by crediting it, you have done a reversal. And that reversal is partial because it is only affecting one. Complete reversal will affect both of them. Partial reversal affects one of those accounts. The trial balance will balance simply because you have done either 2 debits or 2 credits instead of a debit and a credit entry. Number 4 is the arithmetic errors. The arithmetic errors. Arithmetic errors. These ones occurs mostly when you are extracting your balances. In the process of extracting your balances, because the trial balance is normally prepared using the balances, you make the errors of addition and subtraction. You want to get the balance in the cash account, you need to add the totals of the debit, you minus the totals of the credit so that you can get your balance carried down. But in the process of adding and subtracting, you do a slight mistake, and therefore you get a wrong balance. That wrong balance is taken to the trial balance. Your trial balance will never balance. Your trial balance will never balance. And we have said that these errors, they are going to be detected in the trial balance simply because your trial balance will not balance. So what will happen is this. You will go ahead and prepare your trial balance. Have your ledger accounts that you use to extract the trial balance. You have the DR and the CR. So what has happened here, maybe you had account A, you had a balance of 500 as by your books. Account B, it has 5,000 on the credit. Account C, it has maybe 2,000, and maybe account D, which has got 3,000 on the credit. As by your ledger accounts, when you try to balance your trial balance, what do you realize? The debit has got 500, the credit has got 8,000. This is a very good indicator that something is wrong in your ledger accounts. You have done some of those errors in your ledger accounts, and you need to go ahead and rectify those mistakes. The moment your trial balance fails to balance, it is now the responsibility of the accountant, first of all, before the investigations are done, that particular difference is supposed to be entered in an account called the suspense account. Before the investigations are done, the difference that has been revealed in the trial balance is temporarily recorded in the suspense account before the investigations are done and those errors corrected. So what will you do? You'll find that the debit is having less by 1,500. So you go to your suspense account. On the side with less, it is the debit with less. You go to your suspense account and put that as balance brought down 1,500. And then you now go and do the investigation to try and find out why is it that the debit is having less by 1,500. Once all those errors have been corrected, your suspense account will serve balance without inserting a balance carried down. So you can go and investigate and find that maybe there is a figure of 1,500 that was never debited. Maybe we did a single entry. We did not debit maybe an account by the name what? Rent account. We did not debit the rent account. And then that one is done, you're going to find that your suspense account is going to come and balance. So a suspense account is a temporary account where the amount making the trial balance not to balance is temporarily recorded before the accountant can launch their investigations. And once the investigations are done, and all the errors have been corrected, you'll find that your trial balance will balance. Maybe it was a figure like rent that was missing somewhere of 1,500. Once you have inserted it there, it will balance. Balance like that. So the errors affecting the totals of the trial balance will make use of this account we call the suspense account. We will make use of the suspense account. And you'll find that in most cases, these errors, they are going to be affecting one account. They are going to be affecting one account. A transaction happened, one account was correctly recorded, and one had an issue. You correct the one with issue, and then you also incorporate the suspense account. You incorporate the suspense account. So let me give you a few of those errors. Let us have our general terms here. Okay, so we see the number of the error, the details, the PR and the CR. I'm going to give you a random errors. Number one, you can be told that sales account has been undercut by 2,500. That is an error that has been revealed. Sales account has been undercut by 2,500 shillings. So it is clearly indicated that sales account is missing 2,500. So I want you always, as we correct these errors, I want you to remember what I told you as far as the trial balance is concerned. We say that sales is always credited. If sales is always credited, and now here you have been told that there is an undercast of 2,500, then it simply means that on the sales account, on the credit side, because it is always credited, 2,500 is missing. It is undercast, meaning that we recorded by less. It is going to be less on the credit side of sales because sales is always credited. So how do you handle this now? We said when it is an undercast, the responsibility you have is like to add, is like to top up. Because 2,500 is missing on the sales account and sales account is always credited, so we shall credit again the sales account by this 2,500 so that we can now add it up to the amount it was supposed to have. Sales is always credited. So what you need to do is to identify the other account that is affected. The other account that is affected is now going to be suspense. That's why I've told you the errors affecting the totals of the trial balance, they normally make use of the suspense account. Suspense account is like a swing account. It does not have a specific phrase, whether it is debited or credited. Concentrate on correcting the error. Once you have determined that sales is going to be credited to correct this error, and now that you don't have any other account, you now use the suspense account as the account to be debited. So you come here and say error number one, sales is going to be credited, but I told you in the general journal, always start with the account to be debited. Always start with the account to be debited. The account to be debited therefore will be suspense, and the suspense is just there to complete the double entry in the general journal here. And then you credit your sales account by 2,500. This is where you are focus should be there. Focus on correcting the error in the sales account. Once you have known that the error is going to be corrected by crediting the account, then you debit the suspense account. Once you identify that the error is going to be debited, then suspense account will be credited. So don't focus on suspense, focus on the error. The suspense account will come to complete the double entry. Let us see number 2. Purchases account has been overcast by 5,000. Purchases account has been overcast by 5,000 shillings. Somebody to tell me, on which side do we record entries in the purchases account? When we buy goods, we debit or credit purchases?
We debit.
We normally debit the purchases account, correct? But in this era, we have been told that purchases account has been overcast. Overcast means that we have debited by excess. It is an excess debit. So the responsibility we have here is to reverse or to subtract the excess amount. And if an account is debited, I've told you to reverse or subtract that amount from that account, you put it on the other side. Purchases is always debited, correct? But in this case, it was an overcast. We overdebited that account. We overdebited that account. We need to reverse this 5,000 from that account. So what do? You go and credit purchases. To reverse an overcast in purchases, you credit purchases. And then once you have credited purchases and now you don't have any other account, the other account that will complete the double entry for that error would be the suspense account. The suspense account. So you come here and start with it because it is going to be debited. Suspense of 5,000, then credit the purchases. 5,000. Number 3, goods sold by cash or shillings 3,000 have only been recorded in sales account. Goods sold by cash for 3,000 have only been recorded in sales account. So it is very specific here. It is very specific. You are told that goods were sold and they were sold by cash. Obviously, you know that when goods are sold, we normally credit the sales, and if they are sold by cash, we debit the cash account. But the last part of this statement tells us where the problem is. It says have only, they have only been recorded in the sales, meaning that we have not recorded that transaction in the cash. We have not recorded it in the cash. So don't make a mistake of recording it in sales and cash. It has already been recorded in the sales. So leave alone the sales account. Leave alone the sales account. Now, focus on the other account which was supposed to be recorded. The other account is supposed to be cash. And the cash, when sales has happened, it is supposed to be debited. So this accountant forgot to debit cash. He only credited sales, he forgot to debit cash. So you come here as a good student and do what? Debit the cash that was never recorded by 3,000. Now that you don't have the other account to credit, sales has already been recorded, so don't record it again. You come here and you operate the account by the name of suspense. It was only recorded in sales. So you cannot record it again in sales. In sales account, mambo iko shwari. Just focus on the other. Number 4. Rent expense paid by check for 9,000 was recorded as 900 bank account. Rent expense paid by check for 9,000 shillings was recorded as 900 in the bank account. So when rent is paid and being an expense, we will debit the rent expense and credit the bank account. That is the first thing that we need to agree. When rent is paid, being an expense, we debit rent, we credit bank. But as per this particular statement, it is very clear. The problem is the amount that we use in the bank. The problem is the amount that we use in the bank, which is 900, meaning that rent was correctly debited with 9,000. Always read the last statement. How the statement is ending, it will give you an indication on where the error is. You are told was recorded as 900 in the bank. So there is no problem in rent account. The problem is only in bank. This statement is very different from the statement that can read rent expense paid by check for 9,000 was recorded as 900 in the books. When it reads in the books, it simply means that both of them have got issues. But when it points one account, it simply means that that one account is the one with issues. The other one does not have. So it is only in the bank account where 900 was used, but in the rent, 9,000 was used. So we remove rent from the equation. Rent is not part of the problem here. The problem is in the bank. And you can agree with me, bank has been undercasted. It has been recorded by less amount. And the amount is less by 8,100. 8,100 is missing. We only use 900. 8,100 is missing. So that 8,100 plus 900 can add up to 9,000. So you ask yourself, on which side were we supposed to record this transaction in the bank account? When you pay rent, you debit rent, you credit bank. So bank has only been credited by 900. So 8,100 is missing on that same side. We have only credited by 900. We need to add 8,100 on the same side of credit side so that it can add up 9,000. So bank will be credited and the account will be debited here with suspense. 8,100, then you come here and credit bank by 8,100, and then the problem is sorted out. So when you are reading these errors, you need to be reading them with a lot of caution, so that you don't use the accounts that have no problem. Like number 4, rent has no problem. Here, number 3, goods have been sold. They have been sold by cash and have only been recorded in the sales. So you can be able to see that sales is not having any problem. You deal with only cash. So always read the statements with a lot of caution. With a lot of caution. Now, Mwalimu feels like he's tired.
Mwalimu,
Yes.
could you kindly give us an example where you have two accounts instead of using the suspense account?
Where
Or
you
that never happens, where we have a mistake that needs to be corrected
yes.
on two different accounts instead of using the suspense account.
Those are the ones that we have been handling in the errors not affecting. The ones we handle,
Okay.
yes. The error of omission, those are the accounts whereby we have the two accounts without the suspense. Actually, all of the errors not affecting, error of omission, principal, complete reversal, they don't use the suspense account. They don't use account. You always have two accounts to debit and to credit. But here, any error affecting the totals of the trial balance, you have to use the suspense.
Okay, noted. Thank you.
Yes, yes. Okay. Will allow me to stop there for today. Sunday we shall have a class. And in that class now, our focus will be on the past paper questions. Past paper questions that have been tested in this particular topic, the accounting errors. So let us stop there for today. And at least today you have got a good understanding on what we do on errors. So in most questions you'll find in an examination, they don't separate as I have done. You know, I started with the errors not affecting, and now I have come to errors affecting the totals of the trial balance. In most questions, you'll find that those errors are going to be mixed in one question. You find that transaction 1, it is an error not affecting. Transaction 2, it is affecting the totals of the trial balance. So you need to sort them out as you solve them like that. So, simuwe na Saturday njema.
What time
Hata na wewe.
tomorrow?
Hata na wewe.
Okay, thank you very much.
What time for tomorrow's class? What time for tomorrow's class?
I will communicate. Let me confirm
Okay.
that it will be around 4 p.m.
All right. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, karibu.